On blind date, his new assistant helped a fallen elderly lady. Didn't expect that she is the billionaire's grandma. Jada Williams checked her phone again. 7:47 p.m. The performance review that could make or break her first week at Donovan Tech was happening right now, 3 floors above her head. And here she was standing in a Portland parking lot watching paramedics load a stranger into an ambulance. Have you ever helped an elderly person? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She was already 20 minutes late for the most important meeting of her career when she saw the old woman fall. And everything changed with the choice she made next. Jada Williams checked her phone again. 7:47 p.m. The performance review that could make or break her first week at Donovan Tech was happening right now, 3 floors above her head. And here she was standing in a Portland parking lot watching paramedics load a stranger into an ambulance. Her work skirt was stained with rainwater. Her heels sat abandoned on the wet asphalt beside her. And her boss, the Blake Donovan, the 32-year-old billionaire who could fire her with a text message, was probably wondering where his new assistant had disappeared to. But when that elderly woman had stumbled near the restaurant entrance, her fragile frame crumpling against the concrete like paper in the wind, Jada hadn't thought about consequences. She just moved. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Jada had whispered, kneeling beside the woman whose silver hair was now damp with Portland's evening drizzle. The woman's eyes were open but confused, searching Jada's face like she was trying to remember something important. "I'm okay, dear," the woman had said, her voice surprisingly strong despite the blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "Just clumsy old Gloria taking a tumble." Jada had pulled off her blazer and folded it under the woman's head. She called 911. She'd held Gloria's hand while they waited, talking about nothing and everything. Baltimore winters, the price of coffee, how hard it was to find good people these days. 23 minutes. That's how long Jada had sat on that cold pavement, missing the meeting that was supposed to secure her future, helping someone she'd never see again. Or so she thought. From inside Lakeside Grill, Blake Donovan had watched the entire scene through floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd been waiting for his blind date, some setup his business partner had arranged, promising him a woman who wasn't interested in his bank account. Instead, he found himself captivated by something else entirely. His assistant. The sharp woman from Baltimore he'd barely noticed beyond her ability to figure out the office printer and remember his coffee order. She was out there ruining her work clothes for a complete stranger, and something about the way she moved, gentle but certain, kind without being weak, made his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with business. Blake had hired dozens of assistants over the years. They lasted 3 months on average before quitting or getting fired for trying to sleep their way into his personal life. Jada was different. She showed up on time, did her work without drama, and left at exactly 5:30 to pick up her daughter from aftercare. He'd thought that made her boring. Watching her now, sitting cross-legged on wet concrete while she waited with a bleeding stranger, Blake realized he'd been completely wrong about what boring meant. Have you ever been late for something crucial and faced a choice between helping someone or saving yourself? When was the last time you stopped everything for a stranger? Sometimes the most important moments happen when we're not thinking about ourselves. What if that one choice changed everything about your future? The ambulance pulled away, red lights disappearing into Seattle traffic. Jada stood slowly, gathering her blazer and ruined heels, checking her phone one more time. 8:15 p.m. The meeting was definitely over. She had no idea that the woman she'd helped was about to hand her the power to control the man watching her from the window. The same man who would call her into his office tomorrow morning, expecting to fire her for missing their appointment. But as Blake watched Jada walk toward the building entrance, her head held high despite knowing she was about to face consequences, he made a decision that would surprise them both. Some rules were worth breaking for the right person. If you've ever helped someone when it wasn't convenient, drop a heart in the comments. She walked into his office expecting termination papers. Instead, she found the woman from the street sitting in the CEO's chair. The executive floor felt different this morning. Whispered conversations stopped when Jada stepped off the elevator. Other assistants shot her worried glances before quickly looking away. The kind of looks that said everyone knew something she didn't. Jada straightened her shoulders and walked toward Blake's corner office. Through the glass walls, she could see the blinds were drawn. Unusual for a man who liked to survey his kingdom from 30 floors above Seattle. Her knock was answered by a voice she didn't recognize. "Come in, dear." Jada pushed open the door and froze. The woman from last night, Gloria, sat behind Blake's massive desk like she belonged there. Her silver hair was perfectly styled now, the cut on her forehead covered by a small bandage. She wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than Jada made in a month. Blake stood near the windows, his back to the room, shoulders rigid with tension Jada had never seen before. "Sit down, please," Gloria said, gesturing to the chair across from the desk. "I believe introductions are in order." Jada remained standing. "I'm sorry, but who are you exactly? And why are you in Mr. Donovan's office?" Blake turned around then, his face a mask Jada couldn't read. "Jada Williams, meet Gloria Donovan, my grandmother." The words hit like cold water. Grandmother, the woman she'd helped, whose hand she'd held while waiting for paramedics, was family to the man who controlled her paycheck. "Your grandmother," Jada repeated slowly. "The woman who was bleeding on the sidewalk last night. The very same." Gloria's eyes sparkled with something that might have been amusement, though I prefer to think of myself as the woman whose life you may have saved. Head injuries in people my age can be quite serious, you know. Blake's jaw tightened. "She's being dramatic." "It was a minor fall, was it?" Gloria asked, raising one perfectly shaped eyebrow. The paramedics seemed concerned enough, as did this lovely young woman who missed her important meeting to sit with a stranger. Heat flooded Jada's cheeks, so they both knew she'd skipped the performance review. "Perfect. I can explain about last night," she started. "No need," Gloria interrupted. "Your actions explained everything I needed to know about your character." The older woman opened a leather folder that had been sitting on the desk. Inside were documents Jada couldn't read from her position, but Blake's face went pale when he saw them. "What is this?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Justice," Gloria replied simply. "Or perhaps we should call it karma. You see, dear," she said, addressing Jada now. "Yesterday you proved you have something money can't buy. Integrity, genuine kindness. The ability to put another person's needs before your own without calculating what you might gain from it." Blake moved closer to the desk, his movements sharp with controlled anger. "Grandmother, what exactly are you doing? Why should have done years ago?" Gloria's voice carried the weight of authority Jada was only beginning to understand. "Blake, you spent so much time building walls around yourself that you've forgotten what it means to recognize genuine goodness when it's right in front of you." She turned back to Jada. "Did you know, dear, that your boss here has gone through 17 assistants in 3 years? 17, all beautiful, all ambitious, all willing to compromise their principles for access to his world." "Grandmother," Blake's voice held a warning. "All except you," Gloria continued as if he hadn't spoken. "You show up, do excellent work, and leave at exactly 5:30 to pick up your daughter. You don't flirt, don't scheme, don't angle for invitations to company events. You're refreshingly unimpressed by his money." Jada's mouth went dry. Where was this conversation heading? Gloria pulled out a thick legal document. "Blake, I think it's time you learned something about the company you believe you own. Have you ever walked into a room thinking you knew what would happen, only to discover everything you believed was wrong? Tell me about a time when reality surprised you." Subscribe if you love stories where kindness gets rewarded in unexpected ways. When Gloria pulled out the legal documents, Jada's name was already typed at the bottom. "You see, dear," the old woman smiled. "Yesterday you proved you have something money can't buy. Now I'm going to give you something money can't protect against. Power over the man who thinks he owns everything." The woman she helped for 10 minutes was about to hand her control of a billion-dollar empire in the heart of its king. Blake stared at the document in his grandmother's hands like it was a weapon pointed at his chest. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Gloria spread the papers across the desk with the precision of someone who'd been planning this moment for years. 51% controlling interest in Donovan Technologies. Purchased by me in 1987 when your father nearly bankrupted the company with his gambling debts. Never transferred. Never sold. The mahogany conference table stretched between them like a battlefield. Legal documents scattered across its surface like battle plans. Seattle's skyline pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city Blake thought he ruled now hanging in the balance. Jada felt dizzy. I don't understand what this has to do with me. Everything, dear. Gloria's voice was gentle but firm. You see, I've been watching this company, watching Blake for years, waiting for the right moment to ensure its future would be in capable hands. Blake's laugh was bitter. Capable hands? She's been here 1 week, and in that week, she's shown more genuine character than most people display in a lifetime. Gloria turned to face her grandson fully. Blake, you're brilliant, ruthless when necessary, successful by every metric that matters to Wall Street. But you've forgotten something crucial about leadership, which is, his voice could have cut glass. That power without compassion is just tyranny with better press coverage. The words hung in the air like smoke. Jada watched Blake's face cycle through emotions. Shock, anger, something that might have been hurt. So what exactly are you proposing? Blake asked. Gloria smiled. Jada Williams is now the temporary executor of my controlling interest in this company. She'll work alongside you, learning the business, making decisions about major company direction. Think of it as insurance. Insurance against what? Against you becoming your father. The silence that followed was deadly. Blake's hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, Jada thought he might actually storm out of his own office. Instead, he stepped closer to the desk, leaning forward until his face was inches from his grandmother's. You can't be serious. Deadly serious. The papers are already filed with the state. Jada's appointment is legally binding. Blake straightened, then turned that intense stare on Jada. She felt pinned by it, like he was trying to see straight through to her soul. And what do you get out of this? He asked her directly. The question felt like a test. Jada could sense the weight of both their expectations pressing down on her. I don't want anything, she said honestly. I didn't ask for this. Nobody asked for power, Gloria said. That's what makes some people worthy of it. Blake moved toward the wall of windows, running his hands through his dark hair. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. So, I'm supposed to just accept this? Run my company with someone who doesn't know the difference between profit margins and prophetic margins? You're supposed to teach her, Gloria replied. And more importantly, let her teach you. Teach me what? How to see people as more than assets or liabilities. How to build something that lasts beyond quarterly reports. The older woman's voice softened. How to be the kind of man worthy of the legacy your grandfather started. Jada watched this family drama play out, feeling completely out of her depth. Yesterday, she was worried about keeping a job that paid her rent. Today, she apparently controlled a billion-dollar company. What would you do if someone gave you power over the person who intimidated you most? Would you use it or get back? Comment below if you've ever been underestimated by someone in power. As Blake stormed toward the door, Jada's voice stopped him cold. I didn't ask for this. He turned back, seeing something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. But maybe that's exactly why she chose me. Neither of them was prepared for how right she would be. Power doesn't corrupt everyone. Sometimes it reveals who you really are when no one can stop you. The morning meeting felt electric with unspoken tension. Department heads who used to hang on Blake's every word now watched Jada, measuring her presence, testing her resolve. She sat in the chair that had been Blake's for 3 years, leather still warm from where he'd moved to the seat beside her. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The Morrison account, Blake said, his voice professionally neutral. They're threatening to pull their contract unless we lower our rates by 15%. What? Jada asked. The question seemed to surprise him. Because they can. They're our biggest client. That's not what I meant. Jada pulled the contract toward her, scanning numbers she was still learning to interpret. Why are they really threatening to leave? What changed? The marketing director, Sarah Chun, shifted in her seat. There's been some speculation in the tech blogs about company instability since the ownership transition became public. Jada looked around the table. These people have been running scared since Gloria's announcement yesterday. They were waiting to see if she'd crumble under pressure or make decisions that would tank their stock value. So they think we're weak, Jada said. They think there's opportunity, Blake corrected. When leadership changes, clients often try to renegotiate terms. Jada studied the contract again. Morrison Industries had been with Donovan Tech for 5 years. They'd grown their revenue by 300% using Blake's software solutions. Now, they wanted a discount because they thought a single mother from Baltimore couldn't handle big business. No, she said. Blake's eyebrows lifted. No, we don't negotiate with clients who mistake transition for weakness. Jada pushed the contract back across the table. Send Morrison a reminder of exactly how much revenue they've gained since partnering with us. Include projections of what they'd lose by switching to our competitors. And add a note that our rates are actually increasing by 8% next quarter for all existing contracts. The room went dead silent. You want to raise their rates? The CFO looked like he might faint. They'll definitely leave. No, they won't, Jada said with more confidence than she felt. Because they're not actually unhappy with our service. They're testing boundaries. The question is whether we're going to let them push us around or remind them why they needed us in the first place. Blake leaned back in his chair, studying her with something that might have been respect. That's a huge risk. So, is teaching our clients that threatening us gets them better deals. The meeting continued, but something had shifted. Department heads started directing questions to both Blake and Jada instead of just him. When someone presented a marketing proposal that would cut employee benefits to increase profits, Jada vetoed it immediately. Find another way, she said simply. We don't build success on our employees' backs. After everyone filed out, Blake and Jada were alone in the conference room. He walked over to where she was gathering papers, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne. The Morrison decision, he said, his voice low, that was either brilliant or catastrophic. I guess we'll find out. He leaned against the table, watching her with those intense dark eyes. You realize you just made your first real executive decision. How does it feel? Terrifying, she admitted. Blake smiled. The first genuine smile she'd seen from him since this whole thing started. Good. The moment you stop being afraid of the consequences is the moment you stop making careful decisions. Have you ever had to work closely with someone who frustrated and fascinated you at the same time? How did you handle that tension? Like this video, if you've ever been thrown into a situation way over your head. When the board meeting ended and they were alone in the elevator, Blake's control finally cracked. You have no idea what you're doing, he said, stepping closer. Then teach me, she whispered back, not stepping away. The elevator stopped, but neither of them moved to leave. She was learning to command a boardroom, but he was teaching her to desire things she'd never dared want. His private office after midnight felt like a different world. City lights painting shadows across their scattered papers. Takeout containers marking the hours they'd spent together, learning each other's minds. Revenue projections are about more than numbers, Blake said, reaching across the desk to point at the financial reports spread between them. They're about understanding human psychology. What makes people spend money? What makes them trust you with their business? Jada tried to focus on the spreadsheet, but his hand was close enough to hers that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. They've been doing this for 3 days now. Staying late, going through company files, him teaching her everything she needed to know to make informed decisions. It was professional, completely professional, except for the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, and the way her pulse jumped every time he moved close enough for her to catch his scent, and the electricity that seemed to crackle in the air between them whenever their hands accidentally touched. The Morrison account called back, she said, try to redirect her thoughts to safer territory. Blake's smile was triumphant, and they accepted the rate increase without negotiating, apologized for the confusion, and signed a 3-year extension. How does that feel? Like maybe I'm not completely hopeless at this. He was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the soft light from his desk lamp. You know what I think? What? I think you're exactly what this company needed. What I needed. The words came out softer than he'd intended, and Jada saw something flicker in his expression. Vulnerability he usually kept locked away. Blake, I know this situation is complicated, he said, moving around the desk to sit on the edge, closer to her chair. I know you didn't choose any of this, but I'm glad you're here. The confession hung between them, honest and dangerous. Jada felt her carefully maintained professional boundaries starting to blur. Your grandmother is a very smart woman, she said. She is. Sometimes I think she's too smart for everyone's good. He paused. Can I ask you something? Sure. That night outside the restaurant, when you saw her fall, what made you stop? Jada considered the question. I don't know. Instinct, I guess. She looked scared and alone, and I couldn't just walk past that. Even though you knew it would cost you something important. Some things are more important than job security. Blake nodded slowly. I used to think that was naive. The idea that you'd sacrifice your own interests for a stranger. And now I think maybe I've been the naive one. Thinking that success meant protecting yourself from everyone else's problems. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling around them like a blanket. I should probably head home, Jada said, glancing at the clock. It's almost 1 a.m., and I need to pick up my daughter from her sleepover tomorrow morning. Of course. Blake stood when she did, but didn't move away. Jada, yeah, thank you for everything, for helping her that night, for not running away when she dropped this responsibility on you. He paused, seeming to search for words. For making me remember why I started this company in the first place. She was close enough now to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to count his eyelashes if she wanted to. The air between them felt charged with possibility neither had acknowledged before. When someone you didn't expect starts teaching you things that change your whole perspective, how do you handle those feelings? Share this video if you believe in learning from unexpected teachers. As she gathered her papers to leave, Blake caught her wrist gently. Jada, he said, voice rougher than usual. What we're doing here is not just about business anymore. Her pulse jumped under his fingers. I know, she admitted, and the truth hung between them like a challenge neither was ready to answer. When crisis strikes on a Saturday night, you learn who someone really is, and sometimes that person is everything you never knew you needed. The call came at 9:47 p.m. Blake's voice was tight with stress. We've got a problem. The Tokyo servers crashed, and we're losing millions by the hour. I need you here. Now. Jada stared at her phone, then at her 8-year-old daughter Maya, curled up on the couch watching cartoons. Her babysitter had canceled 2 hours ago with the flu. Blake, I can't. My daughter. Bring her. The words hung in the air. In 6 months of working together, he'd never acknowledged she had a child, let alone suggested bringing her to his pristine corporate world. Are you serious? Dead serious. This crisis could tank our Asian partnerships. I need your mind on this, Jada. Both of you get here. The executive floor at night felt like a different planet. Empty halls echoed their footsteps as Jada led Maya toward Blake's office. The little girl's eyes wide at the floor-to-ceiling windows showing Seattle's glittering skyline. Blake stood at his desk, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair disheveled, surrounded by 3 computer screens showing red numbers that kept climbing. When he looked up and saw Maya, something in his expression softened. You must be the famous Maya, he said, crouching to her eye level. Your mom talks about you all the time. Maya giggled. She says you're scary but nice inside. Blake's eyes met Jada's over Maya's head. Your mom's pretty smart. Have you ever seen someone in a completely different context and realized you'd misjudged them entirely? What changed your perspective? For the next 4 hours, Jada worked on crisis management while Blake, Billionaire CEO Blake Donovan, helped Maya with her weekend homework, ordered pizza, and even built a fort out of office chairs and his expensive suit jackets. The man who commanded 1,000-person meetings sat cross-legged on his Persian rug, patiently explaining multiplication tables while Jada coordinated with tech teams across 3 time zones. "Your mom's really good at her job," Blake told Maya as they worked together. "I know. She fixes everything. Even when Daddy left, she fixed that too." The room went quiet. Blake's eyes found Jada's across the office, seeing something new in the way she held herself. Strength built from surviving things he'd never had to face. By 1 a.m., they'd stabilize the servers and save the company $12 million in potential losses. Maya had fallen asleep on Blake's leather couch, covered by his Armani blazer. "I should get her home," Jada whispered, but Blake caught her arm gently. "Stay, both of you. I've got spare bedrooms upstairs, and it's late." "Blake, I can't. Please." The word came out rougher than he intended. "Tonight, seeing you handle that crisis while taking care of her. I've never seen anything like that. You're incredible, Jada." The distance between them felt charged with something neither had acknowledged before. His penthouse apartment above the office was all clean lines and expensive furniture, but when he tucked a blanket around Maya on his guest room bed, he looked like he belonged there. "She's beautiful," he said softly as they stood in his kitchen, the city spread out below them through massive windows. "She's everything to me. I can see that. It makes you—" He paused, searching for words. "It makes you even more amazing than I already thought." When she started to protest, he stepped closer. "I'm not good with families, Jada. Never had a real one. But watching you tonight, the way you balance everything, protect her while still being brilliant at your job, it's extraordinary." His hand came up to touch her face, thumb brushing across her cheek. "You're extraordinary." The kiss was inevitable. Soft at first, then deeper as she leaned into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "This changes things," she whispered. "Everything," he agreed. Hit subscribe if you love stories where tough people show their soft sides. After Maya fell asleep on the office couch, Jada found Blake standing at the window, tie loosened, looking younger than she'd ever seen him. "Thank you," she said softly. He turned, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "For what?" "For letting me see this side of you." The distance between them felt charged with possibility neither had acknowledged before. But tomorrow would bring questions they weren't ready to answer, and choices that would test everything they discovered about each other tonight. Some lines, once crossed, change everything, and she was about to discover which rules were worth breaking. The company celebration at the Four Seasons felt like a trap. Jada stood in her borrowed black dress. Maya's babysitter had insisted she needed something fancy enough for billionaires, watching Blake work the room in his element. Every conversation stopped when he appeared at her side, hands settling on the small of her back like he belonged there. "You clean up nice, boss," she murmured, adjusting his tie. "Don't call me boss tonight," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Tonight we're just Blake and Jada." The whispers started immediately. Seattle's business elite weren't subtle about their stares or their speculation. She caught fragments of conversations that made her stomach twist. His assistant, "Can you believe? Obvious what's really going on. Wonder how long this will last." Blake's jaw tightened each time he heard them, his protective instincts flaring. When a mayor's wife made a particularly cutting comment about ambitious young women, Blake stepped forward. "Careful, Mrs. Patterson. You're talking about the smartest person in this room." The drive to his penthouse was quiet, both lost in thought about the evening's undercurrents. Seattle's lights blurred past the windows as they climbed toward his building. "They think I'm using you," Jada said finally. "They think I'm using you too," Blake replied. Rich guy with daddy issues and his convenient assistant. "Are we using each other?" He pulled into his private garage and turned to face her. "Is that what tonight felt like to you?" His penthouse terrace overlooked Seattle's glittering skyline. The city spread below them like scattered stars. The company celebration had ended hours ago, but neither wanted the night to finish. "I've been thinking about this for weeks," Blake said, stepping closer on the terrace. "About you. About us." "There is no us," Jada said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't there?" His hand came up to cup her face. "Tell me you don't feel this too." When you know something could complicate everything in your life, but you want it anyway, what do you choose? Logic or heart? The kiss was different this time, hungrier, more desperate. His hands tangled in her hair as she pressed against him, months of tension finally breaking free. Jada, he breathed against her neck. Tell me to stop. Don't you dare, she whispered back. They moved inside like they were dancing, hands exploring, clothes disappearing between kisses. He lifted her onto his kitchen counter, the marble cool against her skin as he kissed down her throat. Are you sure? He asked, eyes dark with want but still searching her face for doubt. I've never been more sure of anything, she said, pulling him closer. What happened next was inevitable and perfect and terrifying all at once. He worshipped her body like he was memorizing every curve, every sound she made. When she arched beneath him, calling his name, it sounded like coming home. Afterward, they lay tangled on his Italian leather couch, the city lights painting patterns across their skin. What happens now? She asked, tracing circles on his chest. Now we figure out together, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Comment if you've ever risked everything for a feeling you couldn't name. She woke up in his bed to sunlight, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and Blake already dressed, coffee cooling on the nightstand. Her phone buzzed insistently with notifications she'd been ignoring. The headlines were brutal. CEO's assistant sleeps her way to the top. Blake, she called, but he was already in the shower. She scrolled through article after article, each one more vicious than the last. Photos of them leaving the party together, speculation about their relationship, quotes from unnamed sources about her sudden rise to power. But it was the text from Gloria that made her blood run cold. We need to talk. Now, the old woman knew. Somehow, Gloria knew everything, and Jada had a sinking feeling that the chess game she'd been playing was far more complicated than she'd realized. When the world decides you're a scandal, the only question is whether the person you love will stand beside you or step away to save himself. The conference room felt like a courtroom. Board members sat around the mahogany table like a jury ready to deliver their verdict. Newspapers and tablets scattered between them showing headlines that made Jada's stomach turn. This is a disaster, barked Richard Hayes, the longest-serving board member. Stock price dropped 4% overnight. Blake sat at the head of the table, face carved from stone. Jada stood by the windows, watching photographers press against the building's glass walls like hungry wolves. The optics are terrible, continued Sandra Walsh from the PR firm. CEO, sleeping with his assistant? It's every corporate scandal rolled into one. She's not just my assistant, Blake said quietly. She's the interim executor of this company's controlling shares, which makes it worse. Hayes slammed his hand on the table. It looks like she manipulated her way into power through your bed. Jada felt the words hit like physical blows. Every fear she'd buried came rushing back. That she wasn't smart enough, wasn't good enough, that success only came through men's desires. That's enough. Blake's voice cut through the room like a blade. Blake, be realistic, Hayes continued. You need to distance yourself. Publicly. Make it clear this was a mistake in judgment. The room went silent. Everyone waited for Blake's response. The future of both their careers hanging in the balance. Get out, Blake said softly. I'm sorry. All of you. Get out of my conference room. Now, have you ever been judged for someone you cared about? How did you handle people questioning your motives? As the room emptied, Jada remained by the windows, arms wrapped around herself like armor. I should resign, she said without turning around. Like hell you should. Blake, they're right. The optics are. He spun her around, hands gripping her shoulders. I don't give a damn about optics. Do you regret last night? That's not the point. It's the only point that matters. Do you regret it? She looked into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. No, but maybe I should. Before he could respond, his assistant knocked urgently. Mr. Donovan, your grandmother is here. She says it's urgent. Gloria swept into the room like a tiny hurricane, assisted by her nurse, but moving with more energy than Jada had seen from her in weeks. Well, the old woman said, settling into Blake's chair like she owned it, which, technically, she did. This is quite the mess you've made, children. Gloria, if you're here to lecture, Blake started. I'm here to fix this. She gestured to her nurse, who handed over a thick manila folder. Do you really think I didn't plan for this contingency? Jada and Blake exchanged glances. What do you mean? Jada asked. My dear girl, I've been managing corporate scandals since before you were born. Did you think I'd leave your reputations to chance? She opened the folder, revealing private investigator reports, financial records, and photos. Richard Hayes has been embezzling company funds for 3 years. Sandra Walsh's PR firm has been leaking confidential information to competitors. And that charming photographer outside? He's been taking payments from Hayes to manufacture this scandal. The room spun. You knew this would happen, Blake said slowly. I orchestrated it, darling. Every bit of it, including making sure you'd both be too distracted by each other to see the real threats circling your company. Share if you've ever had to defend a relationship others didn't understand. When Jada placed her resignation letter on Blake's desk later that afternoon, his mask finally slipped completely. Don't you dare sacrifice yourself for me, he said, voice breaking. That's not what this is, she lied, already walking toward the door. But his next words stopped her cold. Then why does it feel like you're breaking both our hearts to save my reputation? She turned back, seeing the man behind the CEO facade, vulnerable, scared, and desperately in love with her. The resignation letter suddenly felt like the wrong answer to the wrong question. Outside, the photographers waited for their next shot, but inside this room, the only thing that mattered was the choice between fear and love. Sometimes love means fighting not just for each other, but for the right to define your own story. The press conference podium felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Blake straightened his tie, looking out at the sea of cameras and reporters who'd been circling his company like vultures for 3 days. Jada watched from the wings, her resignation letter still burning a hole in her purse. He'd refused to accept it, refused to let her sacrifice herself for his reputation. Ladies and gentlemen, Blake began, his voice carrying across the packed hotel ballroom. I called this conference to address the speculation about my relationship with Jada Williams. The room erupted with questions shouted over each other. Blake raised his hand for silence. Ms. Williams is not just my assistant. She's not just the interim executor of company shares. She's the most intelligent, capable, and ethical person I've ever worked with. And yes, I'm in love with her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jada's heart stopped. I understand that makes some people uncomfortable. A billionaire CEO and a single mother from Baltimore? It doesn't fit your neat little boxes, does it? But that's your problem, not ours. He pulled out the folder Gloria had given them. The evidence of Hayes' embezzlement spread across the podium. What should make you uncomfortable is that while you've been obsessing over our personal lives, real corruption has been happening right under your noses. Richard Hayes, my former board member, has stolen over $8 million from this company. Sandra Walsh's PR firm has been selling our trade secrets to competitors. And that photographer who's been following Ms. Williams around? He's been paid to create this scandal as a distraction. The room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But Blake's eyes found Jada's in the crowd. I won't apologize for loving someone extraordinary. I won't distance myself from the best thing that's ever happened to me because it makes cowards uncomfortable. Jada Williams earned her position through brilliance, not through any relationship with me. Anyone who suggests otherwise can go to hell. When someone fights for you publicly, even when it costs them something, how does that change how you see them? Backstage, Jada waited for him with tears streaming down her face. When Blake walked off the podium, she threw herself into his arms. You magnificent, reckless man, she sobbed against his neck. Do you know what you just did? I told the truth, he said, holding her tight. I chose us. The board will crucify you. Let them try. Gloria still controls 51%, remember? And she's on our side. They made it back to his office, building through a crowd of photographers, Blake's hand never leaving her back. Inside the elevator, alone for the first time in days, the tension finally broke. I love you too, she said, the words tumbling out like they'd been held prisoner. I'm terrified and it's complicated and I don't know how this works, but I love you. He pushed her against the elevator wall, kissing her with months of pent-up emotion. Say it again, he demanded against her lips. I love you, Blake Donovan, even when you're being an arrogant, self-destructive billionaire. Especially then, he grinned, and for the first time in days, she laughed. The elevator opened to his office floor, where his entire staff stood waiting. For a moment, Jada tensed, expecting judgment or whispers. Instead, they broke into applause. About time, boss, called Marcus from accounting. We were starting to think you were too chicken to tell her. Like this video, if you believe love should be defended, not hidden. That night, they made love in his penthouse with a desperation born of nearly losing each other. Every touch was a promise. Every kiss a vow that they wouldn't let the world tear apart what they'd built. No more running, Blake said as they lay tangled in his sheets, Seattle's lights painting patterns on their skin. No more hiding, Jada agreed. As they watched the news coverage from his couch, her head on his shoulder, Blake's phone rang. Gloria's voice was weak but triumphant. Phase 1 complete, darling. Now comes the real test. The line went dead, leaving them both wondering what the old woman had planned all along. But whatever came next, they'd face it together. The woman who brought them together had been playing chess while everyone else played checkers, and her endgame was about to change everything. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and secrets. Gloria lay propped against white pillows, looking frilier than either Blake or Jada had ever seen her, but her eyes still sparkled with mischief. Sit down, children, both of you. Her voice was weaker now, each word an effort. It's time you understood what's really been happening. Blake pulled 2 chairs close to her bed. Gloria, you should rest. Rest is for people who haven't spent 2 years orchestrating the perfect love story. She smiled, reaching for the manila envelope on her bedside table. Do you really think it was coincidence that brought you together? Jada felt her blood chill. What do you mean? I mean, my dear, that I've been watching you for 8 months. Ever since you applied for that assistant position. Gloria's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope, revealing photographs. You helping Mrs. Chun with her groceries. Volunteering at the food bank on Saturdays. Tutoring kids at the community center after your double shifts. The photos scattered across the hospital blanket like puzzle pieces of a life Jada thought was private. You had me investigated? Blake's voice was sharp with betrayal. I had her observe, darling. There's a difference. I needed to know if she was the kind of person who would do the right thing when nobody was watching. Gloria picked up a photo of Jada reading to children at the library. She passed every test. Tests? Jada whispered. The elderly woman with the heavy bags at the grocery store? My friend Margaret. The lost wallet you returned to the security guard instead of keeping the cash? Mine. The time you gave your lunch to a homeless veteran and went hungry yourself? I watched from across the street. The room felt like it was tilting. Everything Jada thought she knew about her life, her choices, her chance encounter with Gloria, it had all been planned. You manipulated us, Blake said, standing abruptly. You played with our lives like we were chess pieces. I gave you each other. Gloria's voice cracked with emotion. Blake, you were drowning in loneliness, surrounded by people who only wanted your money. Jada, you were sacrificing everything for everyone else, but never believing you deserved love in return. I simply introduced 2 people who needed each other. Have you ever discovered someone you trusted had been orchestrating events in your life? Were you grateful or angry? The surrogacy clinic, Jada realized. You made sure I'd be there that day. I made sure Blake would be there. You chose to help an old woman who fell. That part was all you, darling. Blake ran his hands through his hair. So what? This has all been some elaborate matchmaking scheme. The matchmaking was easy. Making sure you'd both be strong enough to handle what comes next. That was the hard part. What comes next? Jada asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Gloria reached for another envelope, this one sealed with red wax. My real will, the one my lawyers don't know about, the one that changes everything. The machines around her bed began beeping faster as her breathing grew labored. A nurse appeared, checking monitors with concerned efficiency. You have to go, the nurse said firmly. She needs rest. No, Gloria gasped, gripping Jada's hand with surprising strength. The safe. In my study. The combination is the date you helped me in the parking lot. Everything you need to know is in there. Her eyes fluttered closed as the medication kicked in, leaving Blake and Jada staring at each other across her hospital bed. Subscribe if you love stories where everything connects in the end. Gloria's final words before the medication took her under. The company was never the real inheritance, dear ones. It was each other. But you'll understand that when you read what I've left in the safe. The nurse's expression told them time was running shorter than anyone had admitted. Whatever Gloria had planned, whatever final surprise waited in that safe, they'd have to face it together if they could forgive her for orchestrating their entire love story. What she left them wasn't money or power. It was proof that love had been the plan all along. The private safe in Gloria's hospital room opened with a soft click that seemed to echo through the sterile silence. Blake's hands trembled slightly as he pulled out the contents, while Jada stood close enough that he could smell her perfume mixing with the hospital's antiseptic air. The first thing that caught their attention wasn't legal documents or stock certificates. It was photographs. Pictures of Jada at her previous job in Baltimore, helping elderly customers reach items on high shelves. Images of her volunteering at her daughter's school, painting classroom walls on a Saturday morning. A photo of her giving her lunch to a homeless man outside the subway station, taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. She was watching me, Jada whispered, her voice barely audible. For months, Blake pulled out more photos. Jada reading to kids at the library during her lunch breaks. Jada staying late to help a co-worker who was struggling with computer training. Jada buying groceries for the elderly woman in apartment 3B who couldn't get out much anymore. Every single act of kindness documented. Every moment when Jada thought no one was looking, someone had been. Have you ever discovered that someone was paying attention to the good things you did when you thought nobody cared? How would that make you feel about yourself? The letters came next. Dozens of them, written in Gloria's careful handwriting, dated over the past 8 months. Blake read the first one aloud. Day 47 of observation. The young woman at Techno Solutions consistently arrives early to help the security guard with his English lessons. She doesn't know I've been funding his immigration lawyer through a shell company. She helps because it's right, not because she hopes for reward. Jada sank into the hospital chair, overwhelmed. This is crazy. She had me investigated like some kind of criminal. No, Blake said, reading further. She had you investigated like some kind of angel. Listen to this one. Day 89. Jada Williams used her grocery money to pay for medicine for Mrs. Patterson's cat. She ate ramen noodles for a week rather than let an animal suffer. My grandson has never made a sacrifice that didn't benefit him somehow. The words hit Blake like physical blows. His grandmother's assessment of his character, written in black ink that couldn't be argued with. But Jada was reading over his shoulder now, her breath warm against his neck as she leaned in. The intimacy of sharing these revelations drew them closer than any physical touch could have. Here's one about you, she said softly, pointing to a letter dated just 2 weeks ago. Blake showed genuine emotion today when he thought the Williams woman might quit. Not anger about losing a good assistant, but fear about losing someone who challenges him to be better. Progress at last. Their eyes met over the letter, and Blake felt something shift in his chest. The walls he'd built around his heart weren't just crumbling. They were being demolished by an old woman's careful observations. The final document in the safe was a single sheet of legal paper, signed and notarized. Blake read it twice before the words made sense. She's transferring full ownership of her shares to both of us. Equal partners, but only if we're married within 6 months of her death. That's manipulation, Jada said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Blake set the paper down and turned to face her fully. Or is it the push we both needed to stop being scared of what we want? If someone had been watching your everyday actions to judge your character, what would they discover about who you really are? Drop a comment, And tell me about one act of kindness you did this week that no one noticed. The machines monitoring Gloria's condition beeped steadily in the background, reminding them that time wasn't unlimited, that choices had consequences, that love, when it came, didn't always wait for perfect timing. Blake pulled open the bottom drawer of the safe and found one more envelope, thick and sealed with red wax. The inscription read, "For Blake and Jada's first anniversary. Do not open before." As Jada held the mysterious envelope, feeling its weight in her hands, Blake dropped to one knee beside her chair. The hospital room seemed to fade away as he pulled out a ring that caught the fluorescent light and threw it back in tiny rainbows. "We can't read that letter," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment, "unless you're willing to make it possible." She'd gone from assistant to CEO to fiancé in 6 months, but the hardest transformation was learning she deserved it all. The engagement ring felt foreign on Jada's finger as she sat in what used to be Blake's private office, reviewing quarterly reports that would have intimidated her a year ago. Now the numbers told stories she could read like favorite books. Profit margins that funded community programs, revenue streams that supported employee advancement, growth that lifted everyone instead of just shareholders. Blake knocked on her door, coffee in hand, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him in a business setting. "The wedding planner called," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "She wants to know if we're sure about the location." Jada smiled, thinking about their decision to hold the ceremony on the rooftop of the community center they'd built in her old Baltimore neighborhood. Not exactly the society wedding Blake's status demanded, but exactly the celebration their love deserved. "I'm sure," she said, "your grandmother would have loved seeing two worlds become one." The company had transformed under their joint leadership. The boardroom where they'd first fought now hosted weekly strategy sessions focused on sustainable growth and social impact. Blake's ruthless business instincts balanced perfectly with Jada's understanding of what real people needed. Their first major success came from an unexpected place, an employee wellness program that Jada had suggested during a casual conversation. Blake had initially resisted the cost, but the results spoke louder than any argument. Productivity was up 23%, turnover was down 67%, and their story had attracted top talent from competitors who couldn't match their culture. When you finally accept that you deserve good things, how does it change the way you show up in the world? Tell me in the comments about a time when someone believed in you before you believed in yourself. The most surprising change was how naturally Blake had adapted to being part of a family. Jada's 8-year-old daughter, Maya, had been skeptical at first. Rich men in expensive suits weren't exactly common in their old neighborhood. But Blake had won her over not with expensive gifts, but by showing up consistently. School plays, parent-teacher conferences, Saturday morning pancakes that he learned to make from YouTube videos. "Mama," Maya had said one evening while Blake helped with homework at the kitchen table, "he listens different than other grown-ups. Like he really wants to know what I think." That night, after Maya was asleep, Jada had found Blake on their apartment balcony, staring out at the city lights with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "I keep thinking about what Maya said," he admitted, leaning back against her. "About how I listen. I never learned that from my family. They were too busy talking to hear anything." Jada pressed her face against his shoulder, breathing in the scent that had become home to her. "You're not your family." "I'm not," he agreed, turning in her arms. "Thanks to you." The kiss that followed was different from their early, desperate embraces. This was the kiss of people who knew they had forever, who could take their time, savoring each moment. His hands framed her face as if she were something precious, while her fingers tangled in his hair with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. When they moved inside, their lovemaking carried the same unhurried certainty. Every touch was a promise, every whispered endearment a vow they were already keeping. Blake traced patterns on her skin like he was memorizing a map to happiness, while Jada gave herself completely to the man who'd seen her worth before she'd recognized it herself. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets that cost more than her old monthly rent, Jada traced circles on Blake's chest and marveled at how natural this felt. No part of her questioned whether she belonged in his penthouse, whether she deserved the ring on her finger, whether their love could survive the differences in their backgrounds. The foundation paperwork came through today, Blake said sleepily, his fingers playing with her hair. The Gloria Donovan Center for Community Advancement. It's official. Share this video if you believe the best relationships make both people stronger, and subscribe for more stories that prove love can change everything. Their celebration was interrupted by Blake's phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. The caller ID made them both sit up straight. Blake's attorney calling at 11 p.m. Mr. Donovan. The voice was tense even through the speaker. We have a problem. Your father is contesting the will. He's filing fraud charges and claiming Ms. Williams manipulated your grandmother. The media already has the story. The wedding dress hanging in Jada's closet suddenly felt like a target on her back. When family tries to destroy what love built, you discover what you're really made of and what you're willing to fight for. The courthouse steps look like a war zone at 7 a.m. News vans lined up like military vehicles while reporters clutch coffee cups and rehearse their opening lines. Blake squeezed Jada's hand as their car approached the media circus that would determine their future. Remember what we practiced, their attorney whispered as they prepared to exit the vehicle. No comments to reporters. Let the evidence speak. But as they walked through the crowd, microphones thrust toward their faces like weapons. Jada heard the questions that cut deeper than any legal challenge. Ms. Williams, how does it feel to know people think you're a gold digger? Blake, do you really believe your grandmother wasn't manipulated? Is this relationship even real, or just a business arrangement? Blake's jaw tightened with each question, but Jada kept her head high. She'd faced worse than privileged reporters who'd never had to choose between rent and groceries. Inside the courtroom, Blake's father sat with his legal team, looking every inch the successful businessman who'd built his own empire after being cut off from the family fortune decades ago. Richard Donovan had Blake's eyes, but none of his warmth, success, but none of his integrity. The proceedings began with Richard's attorney painting a picture of manipulation and fraud. An innocent old woman, lonely and vulnerable, taken advantage of by a calculating younger woman who'd staged the entire street encounter. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the lawyer declared, this is the oldest con in the book. A pretty face, a sob story, and a lonely elderly woman with more money than sense. When people try to tear down what you've built with someone you love, what gives you the strength to keep fighting? Tell me in the comments about a time when you had to defend something precious to you. But their attorney was ready. The photos from Gloria's safe became evidence of systematic observation, not manipulation. The documented acts of kindness, the character witnesses from Baltimore who'd flown in to testify, the security footage from various locations showing Jada's genuine nature over months of surveillance. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor whose cat Jada had helped, took the stand with her walker and her fierce loyalty. That girl ate ramen noodles for a week to pay for Whisker's medicine, she declared, pointing directly at Jada. You think someone plotting to steal money cares about a sick cat belonging to a woman with nothing? Y'all have lost your minds. The courtroom erupted in supportive murmurs before the judge restored order. Blake's testimony was the turning point. Asked about his relationship with his grandmother, he spoke with quiet intensity about years of emotional distance, about an old woman who tried to teach him values he'd been too proud to learn. She didn't need protecting from Jada, he said, looking directly at his father. She needed protecting from people like us, people who put money before human decency, who see kindness as weakness instead of strength. Richard Donovan's face flushed red, but he remained silent. The most powerful moment came when they played Gloria's own video testimony, recorded just weeks before her death when she sensed the legal challenge coming. Her voice, weak but determined, filled the courtroom. I watched that young woman for 8 months, and in all that time, she never once asked for anything. She didn't even know who I was when she helped me. If that's manipulation, then every Sunday school teacher in America is running a con game. During the lunch break, Blake and Jada found themselves alone in a courthouse bathroom. stealing a moment of privacy in the chaos. "Whatever happens," Jada whispered, straightening his tie with trembling fingers, "we have each other." Blake cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. "We're going to win this. Not because we have better lawyers, but because what we have is real." Their kiss was urgent, desperate, a lifeline in the storm of public scrutiny and family betrayal. Like if you believe true character always wins in the end, and subscribe for stories where love conquers all obstacles. As they returned to the courtroom for the verdict, Blake's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Mama, all my friends saw you on TV. You look like a superhero." The judge cleared his throat, papers rustling in the sudden silence. "This court finds evidence of manipulation," he began, and Jada's heart stopped. "But not where anyone expected. Justice doesn't always look like winning. Sometimes it looks like the people who love you standing up when it matters most." The judge's next words changed everything. After reviewing all evidence, including Mr. Richard Donovan's financial records, this court finds that the challenge to Gloria Donovan's will was filed in bad faith, with the primary motivation being financial gain rather than genuine concern for an elderly woman's welfare. The courtroom erupted. Richard Donovan's face went white as his attorney frantically shuffled papers, looking for an appeal that wouldn't come. Blake felt Jada's hand tighten in his as the judge continued. Furthermore, this court finds overwhelming evidence that Ms. Jada Williams acted with consistent integrity and genuine compassion, with no knowledge of Mrs. Donovan's financial status or family connections at the time of their initial meeting. Cheers erupted from the gallery where Jada's supporters sat. Neighbors from Baltimore, co-workers, parents from Maya's school who'd driven 8 hours to testify for her character. The sound was like thunder, rolling through the formal courtroom and shaking the very foundations of Seattle's stuffy legal establishment. "The will stands as written," the judge concluded, bringing his gavel down with finality. "Case dismissed." Blake pulled Jada into his arms right there in front of everyone, spinning her around as flashbulbs popped and supporters cheered. This wasn't the controlled, calculated man who'd run board meetings with ice in his veins. This was someone completely, utterly, humanly happy. Outside the courthouse, the celebration spilled onto the street like an impromptu block party. Seattle's October rain had stopped just in time, as if the weather itself was celebrating their victory. Mrs. Patterson, still clutching her walker, grabbed a reporter's microphone before anyone could stop her. "You want to know what manipulation looks like?" she shouted into the camera, her voice carrying over the crowd. "It's that man in there trying to steal from his own mother's grave. But that girl? She's the real deal, and anyone with eyes can see it." The reporter, clearly not expecting editorial commentary from an 80-year-old woman with a Baltimore accent and zero filter, struggled to regain control of the interview. When you win something you thought you might lose, how do you celebrate? What matters most in that moment? Share your victory stories in the comments below. Back at Blake's penthouse that evening, the celebration continued with takeout Chinese food and champagne that cost more than most people's cars. Maya, who'd watched the proceedings on livestream from school, was bouncing on the couch with excitement. "Mama, you were on TV and you weren't even scared," she declared, wrapping her arms around Jada's neck. "Wait until I tell everyone at school that my mom is famous." Blake watched from the kitchen doorway, still processing the day's events. His father's betrayal shouldn't have surprised him. Richard Donovan had never done anything that didn't serve his own interests. But seeing it play out in public, watching strangers defend Jada while his own family attacked her, had clarified something important. Blood didn't make family. Love did. Loyalty did. Showing up when it mattered did. "Hey." Jada appeared beside him, noting his distant expression. "You okay?" "Better than okay," he said, pulling her close. "I keep thinking about what my grandmother used to say, that you can judge a person's character by who stands with them when things get hard." And Blake gestured toward the living room where Maya was showing her homework to their attorney, completely comfortable with adults she'd just met. Toward the kitchen counter covered in flowers and congratulatory cards from people who barely knew them, but had been inspired by their story. "I like our people better than his people," he said simply. Their kiss tasted like champagne and victory, but also like something deeper, the satisfaction of being fully known and completely accepted. When Blake lifted Jada onto the kitchen counter, her legs wrapping around his waist, it wasn't just celebration. It was claiming each other all over again, marking territory that no court challenge could ever touch. Subscribe if you love stories where good people finish first, and hit that notification bell for more tales of love winning against all odds. Later, as they stood on the terrace where they'd first kissed, Blake pulled out an envelope that had been waiting in his jacket pocket. "She left instructions," he said softly, showing Jada the familiar handwriting. "One more surprise for our wedding day." But this time, Jada wasn't afraid of whatever came next. 1 year ago, she was an assistant who stopped to help a stranger. Today, she's a CEO who stopped traffic when she walked down the aisle. The rooftop garden of the Gloria Donovan Community Center sparkled with string lights that connected Baltimore's skyline to Seattle's distant mountains, visible on this perfect October afternoon. Two worlds that had seemed impossibly far apart 12 months ago now felt like natural extensions of the same beautiful story. Jada stood in the bridal suite, actually the center's computer lab with white fabric draped over the monitors, while Maya fussed with her veil and Mrs. Patterson provided commentary from her wheelchair. "Child, you look like something out of a magazine," Mrs. Patterson declared, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "That boy better know how lucky he is." The dress was simple but elegant, chosen not for its price tag but for how it made Jada feel. Confident, beautiful, and completely herself. The same woman who'd knelt on wet pavement to help a stranger, now wearing silk and lace because someone had seen her worth before she'd recognized it herself. A knock at the door interrupted the preparations. Blake's business partner and best man peeked in, grinning widely. "There's something you need to see," he said, gesturing toward the window. The street below was packed, not just with wedding guests, but with hundreds of people from both Baltimore and Seattle. Neighbors, co-workers, strangers who'd followed their story and felt invested in their happiness. Someone had set up speakers, and music drifted up from the impromptu street celebration. "Looks like we're having a bigger party than we planned," Maya observed, standing on tiptoe to see over the windowsill. Jada felt tears threaten her carefully applied makeup. A year ago, she'd felt invisible, overlooked, like her struggles and dreams didn't matter to anyone. Now an entire community had shown up to celebrate her happiness. So what would you do if a stranger's kindness changed your entire life? Would you trust that some things are meant to be? Tell me in the comments what act of kindness changed your world. The ceremony itself was perfect in its imperfection. Maya forgot her line as flower girl and improvised with a loud, "Mama, you look really pretty," that got bigger laughs than any scripted words could have. Mrs. Patterson's cat somehow escaped his carrier and decided the altar was the perfect place for a nap, requiring a pause while the ring bearer, one of Maya's classmates, carefully relocated him. But when Blake saw Jada walking toward him, everything else faded to background noise. She wasn't walking down an aisle so much as walking into their future, each step deliberate and joyful. His vows were simple. "I promise to see you, really see you, every single day. To build something with you that honors both where we came from and where we're going. To love not just you, but the family we're creating together." Jada's response made half the audience reach for tissues. "I promise to stop running from good things. To trust that love doesn't always have conditions attached. To build a life with you that would make your grandmother proud and my daughter confident that anything is possible." The kiss that sealed their marriage was witnessed by hundreds of people, but it felt as intimate as if they were alone. Blake's hands framed her face with the same reverence he'd shown during their first kiss, while Jada's fingers tangled in his hair with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged exactly where she was. During the reception, Blake pulled out Gloria's final letter, the one they'd been instructed to open on their wedding day. His voice carried over the crowd as he read, "My dear ones, if you're reading this, you've learned what I hoped you would. That love isn't about rescue. It's about recognition. Blake, Jada didn't save you from loneliness. She showed you that you were never really alone. Jada, Blake didn't lift you from poverty. He saw the richness that was already there. Your first assignment as husband and wife is to help others see the same truth, that every person has worth that has nothing to do with their bank account and everything to do with their heart. The letter continued with instructions for a charitable foundation focused on educational opportunities for single mothers and their children. Gloria's final gift to the world, funded by the love story she'd orchestrated. If this story made you believe in the power of genuine kindness, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories that prove love and integrity can change everything. And remember, you never know when a simple act of compassion might rewrite someone's entire future. The question is, will you be ready when that moment comes? As they danced their first dance as husband and wife under stars that seemed brighter than usual, Jada whispered, "Do you think she planned this from the very beginning?" Blake spun her gently, catching sight of Gloria's portrait watching from the corner table, and smiled. "Does it matter? We chose each other every day after that first one." And in the distance, the community center's lights illuminated the words carved above its entrance, where kindness creates miracles and love builds legacies. Their story was complete, but their legacy was just beginning.